Welcome there, folks. Thank you for joining me today on the non-live broadcast. Today, I am talking a little about my reflection of Beryl, the hurricane that passed through Grenada and devastated Carriacou, our small island, which is about 13 square mile, and the little Petit Martinique, Union Island, and up the road to St. Vincent with the Mustic and one on those islands. I don't know if they get destroyed. I have nothing to show you. You could find those information on the internet. I'm just here to respond to my own question, which is how was my experience? Well, I'm in the middle of Grenada and it did not hit us too devastatingly hard. So I thought, but I did observe the wind and the this is live on my TikTok thing, so you could follow me there and you'll see. I will try. I don't know how to get a whole recording done yet to put it in the YouTube. One thing I note that was very clear to me, I must say, it was the movement of the wind from the west to the east concerned me because it was going up over the Concord Mountain from the west to the east, which is anti-natural because the wind usually comes down the hill, but now it was going up the hill. And I've learned thus far that the people, the farmers up in the mountainside, has complained about the devastation caused to massive trees of crops that they would have had there. So this has opened my eyes to realize that while this was going on, there were some alternative issues happening in the forest. Although the forest was getting wood, we were down here thinking that everything was good. So that is what I have to report on Beryl. But I have seen the photos, and it has been a disaster for many from the point of view of physical loss. In fact, there are lives that have been lost in the island of Carriacou and Petit Martinique. And so we do empathize with those who have lost their their um, their families and so forth and so on during this hurricane. Yesterday, I was looking at Jamaica. Quite an interesting feat in Jamaica, also with the passing of the categories of certain essential categories of this burial, and then up to Cayman. I have not seen much there, and I think it's going somewhere to Mexico. So today I just want to speak about the glucagon-like peptide. It's what's trending on the internet in terms of a hurricane on the internet now. Glucagon-like peptides (GLP). So we are looking, of course, we are now looking at fatty acids in the discussion and the research for the book. We have gone to the liver, we have looked at the kidneys, we have looked at the relationship between the input system and the output system. Input system being that red system, usually referred to as the red system that takes the nutrients from. Remember, the gut and the blood does not connect as we were once perceiving it. There's a small microscopic layer between the gut and the blood system, and the particles of glucose, amino acids, minerals, they jump across from the gut system after going through the villi and getting certain elements checked or whatever. They jump across to the blood system, they go to the liver via the hepatic portal vein, and in the liver they get to be methylated or stamped with the stamp of approval to enter the blood and provide themselves to go to the various organ cells of the body. Transportation, of course, is called the red blood cells or the red blood buses transport these nutrients along the blood itself up to organ cells throughout the body. All the various organs need nutrients and oxygen so that they could perform the duties as time goes by. In this broadcast, we want to look at insulin and glucagon. We have been looking at insulin because the response of insulin is around the pancreas or inside the pancreas. Science will tell us that insulin is produced in the beta cells of the pancreas, some specific cells in the pancreas called the beta cells of the pancreas, eyes of Langerhans, I think, would create this specific hormone or the specific peptide or the specific protein by taking amino acids and creating the insulin, which is secreted, gets to the blood and controls or something like that the movement of the glucose molecules to get into the cells of the different organs. The fat cell, because fat, you have to think about FAT as an organ of function. It does have a function, and we also have insulin pumping at the fat cells, because fat is the first set of cells that should be holding extra glucose when we have extra glucose in our body. And so insulin is quite an interesting folk, an interesting guy who seems to be created not at the point of the digestion, but may be created from the time you have entered something in the mouth, because apparently in the beta cells you have the creation of insulin, synonymous to the creation of amylase, which is used to digest your sugars, or your break down your carbohydrates into your glucose or fructose molecule, whichever one that is to be used to digest that carbohydrates into a sugar-based substance. And when I say sugar here, I'm speaking about monosaccharide and not your table sugar, as we subsequently have to continue to re-educate ourselves on the use of words. There are no sugars in our table sugar except the two type of monosaccharides, glucose and fructose. So apparently insulin is quite important in helping us to move the glucose into the molecule. And what is being said is that the insulin seems to be so prevalent in terms of its frequency and its volume within the operations of the system called the body, that it is now so prevalent that it has gone and beaten the cells to allow them to accept glucose even when they are refusing. So insulin seems to be a slave master beating on the backs of the workers, which is your cells, because remember, the cells do need the glucose, have an input. They would eat or consume the glucose in a production facility called the organelle of the body, mitochondria, and they would excrete carbon dioxide and water while they would have provided ATP, which is your energy source. The carbon dioxide and water gets excreted via the lymphatic system and by the kidneys once these channels are open, which is a whole discussion for another video. However, insulin is the one that seems to be opening into a proper cell, having a fat body, a fat stem, a fat wall. The insulin gets there and it allows the fat to become, I don't know if it is receptive, if that's the best way, receptive to the insertion or the passage of the glucose molecule. So insulin is quite important. So insulin is necessarily attracted to fat. So even though you are thinking insulin for the cells of the organs, you have to be thinking insulin for fat. Insulin is triggering fat, or it's allowing fat to open to allow glucose in. And here is where the revelation has come to me, that if we understood this very early, then we would understand there is not much we could do about insulin apart from controlling our mouths with glucose input. Because the time that our mouth, not even your stomach, because your stomach is highly acidic, pH 1 or 2, to digest protein and fats. But the time you touch sugars in your mouth, when I say sugars now, I'm using the word to mean foods that are complex carbohydrates or weak carbohydrates or whatever carbohydrate that will digest into monosaccharides, glucose, or monosaccharides, fructose, then the pancreas would of course bring together the two elements that helps in the digestive process, which amylase for the sugars to break down the complex carbohydrates into the monosaccharide glucose. Therefore, when we look at it from this point of view, we would say once amylase is being produced, insulin is also being produced. That's a quite a catch we have to compensate our thinking with, because you would think that the insulin is created when the glucose become absorbed from the small intestinal wall into the bloodstream, but that is not what is happening. The glucose does, once it's presented onto the tongue, amylase, the signals are creating the essence for the communication to the pancreas to say provide amylase. And once amylase is being created, because amylase would say I am going to digest more glucose, then insulin automatically would fall in place to say I am waiting on you to send me glucose. So amylase is precursor to insulin only in the operation but not in the creation process. In the creation process, they both are born out of the same womb. Amylase gets triggered and so insulin gets triggered from the same womb. They are twin brothers. It is the story of Esau and Jacob. They are to be born of the same womb. Amylase being the one that would break the bonds of the glucose, break the bonds of the carbohydrates to make the glucose and load it into the bloodstream. And when that happens from the small intestine through the absorptive process, then insulin is there to say, hey, I will escort you across the great waters to bring you where you belong. And insulin does not bring the nutrients or the glucose molecule to the cells. The cells get it through because of the red blood cells and the flow of the pipelines into the capillaries, so forth and so on. But when it reaches to the cell, insulin hooks onto the cell, and because of the fatty nature, all cells have a cell wall that is a fat membrane, and that is what insulin does. It goes onto the fat membrane, and what insulin does is like it melts the fat membrane, not literally melts, but it just causes the fat membrane to relax a little bit, like oh. And so the cell is exposed, and glucose comes in, and then insulin says, "Okay, you have enough." Ooh, closes back up, and insulin should move its way. But what is happening? We are conducting this process too frequent. And so imagine you have the cell, what has to come up, down, up, down, up, down. And you keep on up, down, up, down, up, down. Come on. We have, I have, as you know, damaged the receptor of the cells. The shell, the membrane on the cell on the outside, the fatty membrane has been damaged, because it's too much of up and down. And that up and down is blamed on the guy who has the power to press the button in the elevator man that causes things to go up and down, up and down. We have damaged him. Well, no, he is okay, but he has damage. So we are blaming insulin because we are putting something in our mouth that will cause insulin to be created. And insulin is doing its job, but we are the one who's triggering insulin to do its job. Who do you blame? Blame you, the unconscious person, and become conscious. Your goal in life is to become conscious. Stop putting things in your mouth that would cause and trigger the creation of amylase. The day you do not trigger amylase, which is the enzyme, let me make sure I'm saying this thing right. So amylase and insulin production takes place again. It's the enzyme. So amylase is the enzyme primarily produced by the pancreas and the salivary glands. Primary role of amylase is to break down carbohydrates into the simple sugars. Salivary amylase initiate carbohydrate digestion in the mouth, while the pancreatic amylase continues the process in the small intestine. And all of the both, it doesn't matter the structure, whether they are same or different, they are working towards breaking carbs into its constituency molecule called glucose. The only molecule that you do not have to do much work in life, the only two molecules that you do not have to do much digestive work in life to have access to are glucose and fructose. Every other molecule, including the monosaccharide galactose, is bounded into some shell or some gel, some shell. I call it a shell. In plants, we call it phytic acids, and you have to figure out how you're going to break the phytic acids to get to the minerals in a plant. In an animal, protein. It's also bounded or coiled up, and we have to denature the protein in strong acidic stomach, like pH 1 or 2. So, what we need to do is understand amylase is used to break down these things. So, the production of insulin and amylase is quite an interesting um, an interesting twin that would help us in regulating the glucose balance. And that's why we need to understand why we have to go to the next side of the story, which says, how do we fix some of the issues that we have caused? One, don't let that elevator man go to the elevator and press the button, press like a little child, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. No. How do you cause that? Well, one, what is causing the elevator man to press up and down is this, with glucose based substances. The mouth. That is not the only source of glucose, mind you. Protein could be deaminated, protein could become amino acids. Amino acid goes into the body. Excess amino acid that cannot be utilized would be eventually um, deaminated, of course, or oxidized, or whatever it is, will lose the hydrogen bonds and become a glucose molecule. So glucose comes from many other sources apart from your carb-based food. It comes from even protein. Protein could become glucose if you are consuming so much protein that is not used. And the utilization of amino acids is something that we have to speak about consistently so we could get to that place where we realize amino acids has to be in its correct ratios for maximum utilization, or else we would be just utilizing the limiting rate type amino acids that is used. Come and put it in the bed. Therefore, let's get to the point here that we understand that the insulin, look at the little white one there. The insulin is quite the statement of saying, let's press some buttons on multiple elevators because we have this little guy, or we have generated enough guys. So let's assume we have 100 trillion cells in our body, and we would go and eat some sweetie. What we are doing there, the white one, what we are literally, the little white one, the literally what we are doing, we are creating insulin, an insulin molecule to help substantially feed these 100 trillion cells. Each cell is a little elevator with a little up and down, just a one flow up and down, and each cell has to get its glucose. I don't know if it is enough insulin to go and feed them at the same time. I don't know if it is just the insulin goes to some cell first and then move to the next cells and then move to the next cell. But the point is, insulin goes to the cell membrane, which is the fatty part. So it's a fat attractive substance. It goes to it, and then goes to it. It causes that fat layer, which is the cell membrane, to relax, and that allows the passage of the nutrients, including glucose, to get into the cell. And we know when things get into the cell, what happens? The cell metabolizes or uses these things to create the energy source, and they give out waste, and therefore cells continue their journey. Now, we have been listening a lot about GLP-1. We know that glucagon is that hormone that has to go in times of shortage of dietary glucose. When you do not put glucose in your mouth, glucagon, that hormone, now which is created, let's figure out what it's created with. So it's created and it goes out to the liver and start mining at the liver for stored glucose, literally mines stored glucose, breaks it out, bring it back into the bloodstream, and it's in the bloodstream. If you sit and say at this point in time there is no insulin, then you are lying, because glucagon cannot go to the cells and press the elevator button for up and down. It is still insulin. But what's happening, because it is a mining, internal mining process, a very slow process, what's happening? The glucagon is mining, sending it to the bloodstream, and there is insulin, and the insulin is produced to go and carry that to the cells. Press the elevator button, open the cells, get the insulin in. But the insulin is doing that rapidly, effectively, efficiently, because there isn't much glucose this time. So that's where we start realizing, okay, you go into fasting, you start burning fats around your liver because glucagon comes into play, and that is a very good thing. Now, with the GLP-1s and antagonists that we have been reading about, studying, what we're looking at here. So the glucagon, GLP-1 glucagon-like peptide is a hormone that produced in the intestine, and they say it plays a critical role in regulating the blood sugar levels by enhancing the secretion of insulin in response to eating. So when you eat, what happens? This glucagon-like peptide is released into the intestine, sends a signal to your body or whatever and tells you, hmm, you're full, you're satisfied, and blah blah blah. Now, this GLP-1, what does it do? If you have GLP-1 telling you you're full, you wouldn't eat. And then if you have the GLP-1 very elevated increase, it would lower your dietary glucose levels, and therefore, when your blood glucose goes low, the real glucagon will have to go and find the sugar by the liver, which means that they would have to burn stored sugars, which is stored in the liver side around the fatty liver, or when it's run out, it would start pulling on stored fat in the areas of your belly, your bottom, and so where you have stored extra sugars in the fat cells, and so you see weight loss. So the goal is to go to a state where you have more GLP-1 production. GLP-1 production. So once you have more GLP-1 glucagon like peptide, then automatically you will reach this point where you have insulin without work, and they will collapse because they are amino acids joined together called protein or peptide. They will collapse and convert back into amino acid, and they will not be ponging up on the cells. And then you have glucagon being produced, which will be mining slowly, and you would live. You wouldn't die, you would live because you would have glucose coming in. So, having a common protocol, if you want to introduce yourself with GLP-1, a protocol such as start slow, go slow, start low, go slow, and make sure your diet is full with fats and protein might be a good way to go, because having fats coming in means that you are training or retraining your body to remember its second role after glucose for energy is fats. Now that is not what happens to diabetic. The second rule for people who has insulin troubles is to burn muscles, not fat. So the pathway should have been glucose first, fatty acids or fat second, and then protein third. You should not have been losing your body muscles when you're fasting. You should have been burning fat. But then you start burning your muscles when you are fasting because you are insulin resistant or your GLP-1 is not working well. And so the real glucagon is in trouble. It's burning fat, but then it's not doing it proper. So what the body does, it cannibalizes itself by eating away at your muscles, converting protein into what? Amino acids internally. And when it converts protein into amino acids, it takes these amino acids, deaminize them, take out the nitrogen bond, and gives that amino acids the power to become a glucose molecule. You pass out the nitrogen bond as ammonia or urea in your urine. Fascinating to note that this is happening to many of us because it's an indication of insulin resistance. If you have overcome the challenge of insulin resistance, automatically you will move to fat burning as compared to protein bonding. Thank you for viewing today. If you find this broadcast very useful for you, I would find that you like to subscribe to the channel and you would know when I come live. You would find me on TikTok live more than anything. And also, I would appreciate if you click on the link in my description and support my projects. Right now, we are looking to raise funds for the people of Karikupiti, Martinique, and all the other islands who have been devastated. We also have other projects that you could participate and support, and through the AI Health Insight website. Click the link and click on the projects, and you will see the number of projects that we are trying to fund to have things operational by 2028. Very good evening and bless you too, and may you understand the goodness in our sharing and the nature of our dealings. Have a very wonderful time.